The letter arrived on a Tuesday, which was not the kind of day anything was supposed to happen in Harlan Creek. Nora Voss read it standing at the post window, her coat still buttoned against the October cold, and the postmaster watched her the way people watch a candle in wind, waiting to see which way it would go. She read it twice, folded it along its original crease, and put it in her coat pocket. Then she thanked him, which he had not expected, and walked back out into the street. The letter was from the Harlan Creek Community Choir, signed by its director, a man named Gerald Pruitt, who had a voice like a church organ and the disposition of someone who had been told all his life that this was an important quality. The letter informed Miss Voss that after careful deliberation the choir had concluded her voice was not suited to their ensemble. Too rough, the letter said, unpolished. It would require more remediation than the group's rehearsal schedule could accommodate. They wished her well in other endeavors. She had been singing in that choir for 6 weeks. The post office sat on the main street of Harlan Creek, which meant that when Nora came back out through the door, she came out in front of whoever happened to be passing, and on that Tuesday morning that included 3 women from the ladies' auxiliary, the feed store owner, and a man named Calhoun Briggs, who was loading timber into a wagon on the far side of the street and had paused in the way a man pauses when something in his peripheral vision asks him to stop and pay attention. One of the auxiliary women, a Mrs. Aldene Fitch, had a voice built for carrying across open ground, and she used it. She said she had heard about the choir's decision. She said it was a shame, really, though her tone suggested it was not a shame at all, but rather a confirmation of something she had long suspected. She said some people had a gift for music, and some people had a gift for other things, and it was best to know early which kind you were. Nora Voss stood on the boardwalk in front of the post office and listened to this. She was 31 years old, with dark hair pinned under a gray wool hat, and a face that was not beautiful in the easy way, but was the kind of face that stayed with you. The kind that had been shaped by something and had come through it with the structure intact. She kept her chin level in the way of a woman who has decided in advance not to fall apart in public. She said, "Thank you, Mrs. Fitch." That was all she said. She walked north on the main street and turned toward the rooming house where she had been staying since she arrived in Harlan Creek 2 months ago with a single leather satchel, a small tin of her mother's recipe cards, and enough money to last her through the winter if she was careful. Across the street, Calhoun Briggs watched her go. He set down the board he was holding. He stood there for a moment with his hands at his sides, and something moved across his face that he set aside, the way you set aside a tool you are not ready to use yet. By the second autumn, people in Harlan Creek would stop calling the Briggs place a house full of sorrow. Nora didn't know that yet. She had come to Harlan Creek from a town called Morrow Flats, 3 days east by stage, where she had spent the better part of her 20s keeping house for an uncle who left her nothing when he died, but the knowledge that she was capable of a great deal and the freedom to go find out where. She had no family left to speak of. She had learned to cook from her mother, who had learned from her mother, and the recipe tin was the only inheritance that had ever made it down the line intact. She had been in 2 choirs before this one, both of which had welcomed her without ceremony, and she had sung in them without ceremony. And she had not known until Gerald Pruitt's letter that her voice was considered a problem. She did not cry about it. She sat in her room at the rooming house with the letter on the table and the tin of recipe cards open beside it. And she looked at her mother's handwriting on the cards, the small, careful letters, and she thought about what she was going to do next. She had enough for the winter. She did not have enough for the spring. She was still sitting there when someone knocked on the door of the rooming house, and the landlady called up that there was a man asking after her.
Prince was standing in the front room with his hat in his hands when she came downstairs.
He was a large man, not in a soft way, but in the way of someone who had spent years doing physical work and had simply become the shape that work required. He had dark hair going gray at the temples and a beard that was kept but not fussed over. And his hands, she noticed, were the hands of a carpenter, marked by the trade, with the particular kind of steadiness that comes from years of measuring things exactly. He said he was sorry to come without warning. He said he had a situation he wanted to ask her about, if she had a moment. She said she had a moment. He did not sit down. He stood with his hat and said that he had 2 children, a boy of 11 named Thomas and a girl of 5 named Clara, and that he had been managing since his wife passed 14 months ago. But that managing was not the same as doing well, and that he was a man who could build things and fix things and work land, but who could not, as it turned out, run a household and a carpentry operation at the same time, without something suffering for it. And lately it was the children who were suffering for it, and he did not find that acceptable. He said he was not offering charity. He said he was offering work. He needed someone to keep the house, manage the meals, and be present for the children in the hours he could not be. He could offer a room of her own, meals, and a wage that was modest but reliable. He said the arrangement would be temporary if she wanted it to be. He said she was under no obligation to say yes. He said he had watched her this morning on the street, and he had thought she seemed like a person who knew how to be steady, and that was what he needed most. Nora looked at him for a moment. She thought about the letter in her coat pocket, and the recipe tin on the table upstairs, and the number of weeks left in the season. She said, "Can I ask what happened to your wife?" He said fever. He said it was fast. She said she was sorry. He said he was too. She said she would need to see the house before she decided. He said that was fair. They drove out to the Briggs place that afternoon in his wagon, which was loaded on the return trip with timber from the mill, and she sat on the bench beside him and watched the land go by. The creek bottom giving way to open pasture and then to the rise of pine-covered ridge to the north. The house was a frame house with a covered porch, set back from the road on a quarter-mile of lane. It was well built, which she expected, and it was not dirty, which she had not been certain of, but it had the particular emptiness of a place where someone had stopped tending to the small things, the kind of emptiness you feel before you see it. The two children were waiting on the porch. Thomas, the older one, had his arms crossed and his father's particular quality of stillness, and he looked at Nora with the measured suspicion of a boy who had decided some time ago that new things were not to be trusted. Clara, the younger one, had her brother's dark hair and a completely different disposition. She looked at Nora with the direct, uncomplicated interest of a child who has not yet learned that looking at people is something you are supposed to manage. Nora said hello to both of them. Thomas said hello back in the tone of someone completing a required task. Clara said, "Do you know any songs?" There was a pause. Calhoun Briggs looked at the porch boards. Nora said, "I know a few." Clara said, "Good, because Papa doesn't know any." Calhoun said, Clara said, "It's true." The corner of Calhoun's mouth moved once and returned to where it had been. Nora looked at the house and the porch and the ridge behind it, and she thought about the recipe tin and the letter and the winter coming, and she thought about the way Clara had asked the question without any guile in it at all. The way children ask things when they are asking about something larger than the words. She said, "All right." Calhoun looked at her. She said she would take the position. He said, "All right then." That was how it started. She moved her satchel and her tin of recipe cards into the small room at the end of the upstairs hall on a Friday morning. And by Friday evening, she had made an inventory of the larder and identified 3 things that needed immediate attention and 2 that could wait. She did not announce this. She simply started. The kitchen was workable. There was a good iron stove and a deep sink and a larder that had been stocked in the practical way of a man who thinks about meals in terms of survival rather than pleasure. She found dried beans and salt pork and a sack of cornmeal and a tin of coffee, and not much else. She made a list. On Saturday morning, she asked Calhoun if she could take the wagon into town for supplies, and he said yes and gave her money without asking what she intended to spend it on, which she noted. Mikoinum. She came back with the wagon loaded and spent the afternoon putting things in order. And that evening, she made a supper of roasted chicken with pan gravy and cornbread, and a pot of beans cooked with onion, and a heel of salt pork. And when she set it on the table, Thomas looked at it the way you look at something you want and have decided not to want. And Clara climbed into her chair and said, "That smells like something." Nora said, "I hope that's a good thing." Clara said, "It is." Thomas ate 2 helpings and said nothing about it, which Nora understood was its own kind of comment. Calhoun ate quietly, and when he was finished, he said the meal was good. He said it simply, without decoration, and went back to his coffee. She said thank you. That was the whole exchange. In the first week, she established the shape of the days. She was up before the children, had coffee on and breakfast ready when they came down, packed Thomas's dinner pail for school, and had Clara occupied with small tasks or play while she worked through the morning. Calhoun left early and came back at midday if he was working close to the house, came back at dark if he was not. She kept something warm for him either way. She did not comment on his hours, and he did not comment on hers. Thomas watched her the way a surveyor watches terrain, noting and recording and not yet deciding. He was polite in the careful way of a child who has been told to be polite and has chosen to comply as a separate matter from trust. He did his schoolwork at the kitchen table in the evenings while she cleaned up, and one night he asked her, without looking up from his slate, how long she was planning to stay. She said she wasn't sure yet, he said. "All right," she said. "Does it matter to you?" He thought about this for a moment. He said, "Clara gets attached." Nora looked at the back of his head, at the careful way he held his pencil, and she understood what he was actually saying. She said, "I know. I'll be careful." He didn't say anything else, but he didn't leave the kitchen either. By the second week, Clara had taken to following her through the house, not underfoot but close, the way a small animal follows something it has decided is safe. She helped roll biscuit dough and was allowed to cut the shapes, and she took this responsibility with a gravity that Nora found quietly remarkable. She asked questions constantly, not the exhausting kind, but the genuine kind, the kind that wanted real answers. She asked once why Nora's voice sounded scratchy. Nora said it had always been that way. She said some voices were smooth and some were rough, and both kinds were just voices. Clara thought about this. She said she liked rough voices. She said they sounded like they had been somewhere. Nora set down the bowl she was holding and looked at this child for a moment. She said, "That's a very smart thing to say, Clara." Clara said she knew. Nora went back to the biscuits and said nothing more about it. But something in her chest had shifted, the way a door shifts when the wood swells in autumn, not open yet but no longer entirely closed. In the evenings, after the children were in bed, she sometimes sat at the kitchen table with her mother's recipe cards and made small notations in the margins, adjustments for the altitude, substitutions for what the local stores carried. The tin had a latch that didn't quite catch, and she had bent a small piece of wire into a hook to keep it closed. It was a humble fix, and it worked perfectly, which was the kind of thing she found satisfying. One evening, she came down from putting Clara to bed and found that the loose board on the bottom porch step, the one she had been stepping over carefully for 2 weeks, had been replaced. The new board was plain smooth and fitted exactly, and there was no gap. She stood on it for a moment and felt its solidity underfoot. Nothing was said about the step. She said nothing about it either. But the next morning she made sure there was a second cup of coffee on the counter when Calhoun came in from the barn, and she made sure it was there before he asked for it, which he never did. He noticed. He didn't say anything about that either. This was how the two of them communicated in those early weeks, in a language made entirely of small, unremarked actions. And it was a language both of them had learned somewhere before this, in years that had asked them to be quiet about what they needed, and they were fluent in it in the way that people are fluent in the language of their longest survival. The month turned, the light changed, going gold and then going thin, and the mornings came with frost on the grass that did not melt until midday. Nora learned the rhythms of the house and the land and the children, and the house learned her back, the way houses do, slowly and without announcement. She had been at the Briggs place for 5 weeks when the thing happened that she had not expected and that she had not been watching for, because she had not thought she was in the kind of story where such things happened. It was a Saturday, which meant the Harlan Creek market, and Calhoun had taken both children into town to get boots for Thomas before the real cold set in. Nora had stayed behind to put up the last of the fall preserves, and she had been at it since early morning, the kitchen warm and steaming, the smell of apple and spice filling the house. She had the recipe tin open on the counter, her mother's card for apple butter propped against the sugar canister, and she was working through it the way she always worked, steadily, without hurry. She was singing. She had not meant to. It was the kind of thing that happened when she was alone and occupied, the way humming starts without a decision, and it had grown into something more. One of the old songs her mother had sung in the kitchen, a low, wandering melody without words that had no name she knew, only a feeling, the feeling of a hand on the back of your head when you were small and the world was a manageable size. She did not hear the wagon come up the lane. She did not hear the door. She heard Clara say, "Papa, she's singing." Nora stopped. She turned. Calhoun was standing in the doorway of the kitchen with one hand on the frame and his hat in the other hand, and his face doing something she had not seen it do before. Something that was not quite grief and not quite wonder, but lived in the same country as both. Thomas was behind him in the hall, holding a paper-wrapped parcel that was presumably the new boots, and his arms were not crossed. Clara walked past both of them and climbed onto her kitchen chair and put her chin in her hands and looked at Nora. She said, "Don't stop." Nora looked at all three of them in the kitchen doorway. She looked at Calhoun's face, at what was on it that he had not yet had time to put away. She said, "I didn't know you were back," he said. "I know." He said, "I'm sorry to have startled you." She said he hadn't startled her. There was a silence that was not uncomfortable, exactly, but was the kind of silence that knows something has just changed and is waiting to see if anyone will name it. Clara said, again. Nora looked at her. She looked at Calhoun, who had set his hat on the hook by the door and was moving toward the counter in the way of a man who needs something to do with his hands, and he poured himself a cup of the coffee she had left warming on the back of the stove. She turned back to the preserves, and she kept singing. Not loudly, not performing, just the way she had been singing before, low and unadorned, the rough-edged voice her mother had given her moving through the warm kitchen while the apple butter darkened in the pot and the light came through the west window at the angle that meant it was getting on toward afternoon. Thomas sat down at the kitchen table and unwrapped his boots and looked at them. Clara kept her chin in her hands. Calhoun stood at the counter with his coffee and looked out the window at the ridge. Some things change the moment you look at them straight. This was one of those things, and all four of them in that kitchen knew it, and none of them said so, because saying so would have made it smaller than it was. It was a Thursday morning, 3 days after that Saturday, when Aldene Fitch came to the Briggs place. She came in a buggy with another woman from the auxiliary, a Mrs. Crane, who had the quality of a person who attends things in order to have attended them. And they knocked at the front door while Nora was in the kitchen and Calhoun was in the workshop behind the house. Nora answered the door with flour on her hands, which she did not apologize for. Mrs. Fitch said she had come to check on things. She said she had heard that Mr. Briggs had taken on a housekeeper, and she wanted to make sure everything was in order, as a neighbor and as a friend of the late Mrs. Briggs. Nora said things were in order. Mrs. Fitch looked past her into the front room, and then at Nora's flour-covered hands, and then at Nora's face, and she said she hoped Miss Voss understood the particular nature of the situation. A widower with young children, the importance of keeping things proper and above reproach, the way a small community noticed things and drew conclusions. Nora said she understood. Mrs. Fitch said she was sure Gerald Pruitt would be interested to know that Miss Voss had found other employment, given that the choir had been so concerned about her welfare. Nora said she was sure Mr. Pruitt had a great many things to be interested in. Mrs. Fitch's mouth thinned. She said she only meant that people would talk, Nora said. Mrs. Fitch, people in a small town talk the way weather moves, low and fast and ahead of itself. I don't expect to stop either one. Mrs. Fitch looked at her for a long moment. She said, "Good day." Nora said, "Good day." She closed the door and went back to the kitchen and finished the bread she was making. And she did not mention the visit to Calhoun. But Mrs. Fitch mentioned it to other people, and those people mentioned it to others, and within a week there was a particular quality to the way certain women in town looked at Nora when she came in for supplies. A quality of prepared concern that was not actually concern at all, but its useful cousin. Nora went about her business. She did not stop going to town. She did not stop holding her chin level. She bought what was needed and exchanged pleasantries where they were offered and did not offer them where they were not. And she came back to the house on the ridge with the wagon and the children and the work of the days, and she let the talk be what it was going to be. Calhoun heard it eventually. He heard it from one of his hired hands, who told him in the blunt way of men who are not sure how to soften a thing and decide not to try. He came into the kitchen that evening and stood at the counter while Nora was finishing supper, and he said he had heard what was being said in town. She said she had heard it too. He said he was sorry for it. She said he didn't need to apologize for other people. He said, "I know." He stood there a moment more. He said, "It doesn't change anything here." She said she knew that. He said, "Good." He went to the table and sat down and waited for supper, and that was the end of the conversation. And it was the most direct thing either of them had said to each other about anything that mattered, and both of them understood that it was considerably more than it appeared to be. The situation with Gerald Pruitt came to a head on a Friday evening in November, which was the night of the Harlan Creek Harvest Social at the community hall, an event that the whole town attended because the whole town always attended, and because there was music and there was food, and because in a small place the social calendar is also the social contract. Calhoun had not intended to go. He had not attended public gatherings since his wife died, and the town had understood this and given him room for it. But Thomas had a part in a short recitation that the school children were doing, and Clara had been promised she could stay up. And so he went, and Nora went with them because Clara had attached herself to Nora's hand in the wagon and had not let go. The hall was full and warm and smelled of pine boughs and roasted meat, and the particular smell of a community that has been working hard all season and is allowing itself one evening of relief. People greeted Calhoun with the careful warmth you give a man who has been grieving, and they looked at Nora with the other thing, the thing that had been circulating through town for 2 weeks now, and she felt it but kept her face where it needed to be. Gerald Pruitt was there, of course. He was always there. He was a tall man with the bearing of someone who considers himself the tallest person in any room he enters, and he had with him the choir, which was assembled at the far end of the hall for the evening's entertainment, and he moved through the room with the particular authority of a man who controls which voices are heard and which are not. He stopped when he saw Nora. He said, "Miss Voss." He said he had heard she was working out at the Briggs place. He said it with the tone of a man confirming a rumor he had originated. Nora said that was right. He said he hoped she had found the work suited to her abilities. She said she had. He said, "Well, some people are made for one thing and some for another." He said it with a smile that was the shape of generosity without any of the substance. Aldene Fitch was nearby, and she made a sound that was the auditory equivalent of a nod. Clara, who was standing beside Nora with her hand still in Nora's, looked up at Gerald Pruitt with the clear-eyed attention of a 5-year-old who has been listening to adults her whole life and has learned that they often say things that don't mean what they sound like. She said, "Nora sings better than anyone." There was a pause. Gerald Pruitt looked down at Clara with the smile still on his face, the kind of smile adults use when a child says something inconvenient, the kind meant to diminish the comment by reducing the commenter. He said, "Children have very simple tastes." Calhoun, who had been standing slightly behind Nora and had been still the way he was still when he was measuring something, said, "My daughter has better ears than most." He said it quietly. He did not raise his voice. He said it the way you say a fact that does not require arguing. Gerald Pruitt looked at him. The room had gone the particular quiet of a room that is pretending not to listen while listening. Calhoun said, "I'd like to hear her sing tonight, if she's willing." He was not looking at Pruitt when he said this. He was looking at Nora. Nora looked back at him. She looked at his face, which was steady and plain, and asking her something that was larger than the words. And she understood that he was not asking her to prove anything to Gerald Pruitt, or to Aldene Fitch, or to the town. He was asking because he had stood at the kitchen counter 3 weeks ago, with his coffee and his hand on the window frame, and he had heard something in her voice that he had not heard in a long time. And he was asking because he thought the town should hear it too, and because he thought she should not have to stand in this room and be small. She said, "All right." Someone brought her a chair to stand beside. The piano player, an old man named Haskell who had been playing dances and socials in Harlan Creek for 30 years, and who had the musician's instinct for knowing when something real was about to happen, looked at her and said, "What do you know?" She told him. He nodded and set his hands and played 4 bars to find the key and then looked at her. She sang. She sang the way she sang in the kitchen, without performance, without the careful managed quality that comes from singing for approval. She sang the way you sing when the music is the thing and you are just the instrument it is using. And her voice was what it was, low and uneven at the edges and rough in the way that Clara had described. The way of something that had been somewhere, and it filled the hall the way warmth fills a room. Not all at once, but steadily, from the center out. The hall was quiet, not the polite quiet of an audience observing a performance. The quiet of a room that has stopped thinking about itself. She sang 2 verses and a chorus, and then she stopped, and the quiet held for a moment before the room came back to itself. And when it did, the sound it made was not applause exactly, not the organized kind, but the involuntary kind, the kind that comes out of people before they have decided to make it. Clara said, "See." She said it to no one in particular. She said it to the room. Gerald Pruitt was standing near the back wall. His face was doing what faces do when they have been wrong about something and are not yet ready to say so. Aldene Fitch was beside him, and her prepared concern had gone somewhere, replaced by an expression that was less legible and more honest. Nora stepped down from beside the chair and Calhoun was there. Not in a dramatic way, just present. The way he was present when she came back from town and he was already at the barn and glanced over to confirm the wagon was back safe, and he said, quietly, so only she could hear. That was the song from the kitchen. She said yes. He said, "It's a good song." She said her mother used to sing it. He said, "I know." He said, "Clara told me." She looked at him. She said, "When did Clara tell you that?" He said, "A few weeks ago." He said Clara had come to him in the workshop and told him that Nora sang a song that sounded like somebody's mother and that he should know about it. Nora looked across the room to where Clara was now standing beside Thomas, who had his arm around his sister's shoulders in the automatic protective way of older brothers. And she thought about this child who had listened and noticed and carried the information to her father because she had understood, in the way of children who are paying close attention, that it was important. Something moved through Nora's chest that she did not try to name. They drove home under a sky full of cold stars, the children asleep in the wagon bed before they reached the lane, and Calhoun and Nora sat on the bench in the quiet that had been between them since the hall, which was a different quiet now than the quiet of the first weeks, less careful, more like the quiet between two people who have said something true and do not need to say it again immediately. He helped carry the children in, Thomas first and then Clara, and when they came back downstairs the kitchen was cold, and Nora put the kettle on without asking, and Calhoun sat at the table and did not leave the way he usually did at the end of an evening. She set a cup in front of him and sat down across the table with her own. He said, "Pruitt was wrong about your voice." She said she knew that now. He said, "You knew it before." She thought about this. She said, "I knew it was what it was. I wasn't sure it was enough." He said, "It's enough." She looked at her cup. He said, "I want to say something and I want to say it plainly because I don't know another way to say things." She looked up. He said, "I know this arrangement started as one thing." He said he had told her it was temporary, and he had meant that. He had meant for her to have the choice, and he was not trying to take the choice away now. He said the children were not what he was talking about. Though the children were part of it, they were the truest part of it, but they were not the whole of it. He said he had been carrying the house and the work and the grief for 14 months, and he had gotten used to the weight the way you get used to a weight you carry long enough that you stop noticing it. And then she had come, and he had started noticing it again, not because it was heavier, but because he could feel the difference between carrying it alone and not carrying it alone. And he had not expected to feel that difference, and he did not know what to do with it except to say it. He said, "I'm asking you to stay, permanent, as my wife, if that's what you'd want." He said he was not asking her to decide tonight. He said she could have all the time she needed and he would not press her, and he would not make things strange between them while she decided. And if she decided no, he would find a way to make that all right too, because he was not going to take from her the thing he valued most about her, which was that she had never once been backed into a corner in this house, and he did not intend to back her into one now. He said that was all. He picked up his cup and drank his coffee and looked at the table. And the kitchen was quiet except for the kettle settling and the wind coming off the ridge and moving through the pines outside the window. Nora sat with her hands around her cup and looked at this man across the table. This man who had fixed her porch step without comment and left coffee warm without being asked and stood in the community hall and said, "My daughter has better ears than most." This man who had carried his grief for 14 months without putting it down on anyone. This man who had told her she could have all the time she needed and had meant it. She thought about the recipe tin upstairs with the wire hook she had bent to keep it closed. She thought about Clara's hands in biscuit dough and Thomas's arm around his sister's shoulders. She thought about the song her mother used to sing, and the kitchen full of apple butter steam, and the way all four of them had stood in that warmth without anyone saying what it was. She said, "Yes." He looked up. She said, "That's what I want." He looked at her for a moment. His face did the thing it did sometimes. The thing that was not quite grief and not quite wonder, and then it settled into something else. Something that had not been there before. Something that looked like a man who has set down a weight he has been carrying so long he had forgotten what his own hands felt like without it. He said, "All right." She said, "All right." The kettle settled again. The wind moved through the pines. Outside the window, the cold came down off the ridge, and the stars were very clear and very still. They married in December, quietly, at the county clerk's office in the next town over, with Thomas and Clara as the only witnesses. Thomas standing straight in his good coat, and Clara wearing a ribbon Nora had put in her hair that morning. A dark green ribbon from the cedar chest in the upstairs hall that had been there since before Nora arrived and that she had asked Calhoun about, and he had said, "Use whatever you find there," and so she had. When they came back to Harlan Creek, they came back as what they were, and the town took note of it in the way towns take note of things, which is to say all at once and with the full force of its collective attention. And then it adjusted, the way towns adjust, which is to say gradually and without announcement. Gerald Pruitt did not say anything further about Nora's voice. He was at the Christmas social 3 weeks later when Haskell sat down at the piano and looked at Nora across the room with the question in his face, and she nodded, and she sang, and the hall went quiet again the same way it had gone quiet in November. And this time Pruitt stood in the back with his hands at his sides and his face composed in the way of a man who has decided to receive a thing gracefully because the alternative is worse. Aldene Fitch stopped coming to the Briggs place on her checking-in visits. This was, as the narrator notes, as close to an apology as such people give, and Nora accepted it as such. By the time the frost settled in for good, the house on the ridge had become a different thing than it had been. Not loudly, not all at once. The way a room becomes warm, from the center out. Thomas, who had taken 3 months to trust her and had done it one small increment at a time, came home from school one afternoon in January and put his dinner pail on the counter and said, without preamble, that he had told his teacher his mother made the best cornbread in the county. Nora stood at the stove and kept her face where it needed to be, which took some effort. She said, "What did your teacher say?" Thomas said his teacher said she would have to be the judge of that. Nora said, "Well, she said she supposed she'd have to make some for the school." Thomas said that was what he had thought she'd say. He sat down at the table and opened his school book, and that was the end of it. Except that it was not the end of it at all. It was the whole of it. The whole thing compressed into a boy's casual sentence, and Nora understood that, and held it quietly, and did not make it larger than it needed to be, because it was already as large as anything she had ever been given. Spring came slow that year, the way it comes in the high country, reluctantly and in pieces, a warm day followed by 3 cold ones, the creek running high and brown with snowmelt, the pines dropping their old needles to make room for the new. Nora planted a kitchen garden on the south side of the house, in a patch of ground that had been fallow for 2 seasons, and she worked it with Clara beside her and sometimes with Thomas when he was in the mood for it, which was more often than he would have admitted. Calhoun built her a proper cold larder off the back of the kitchen, with a stone floor and a good door, the kind of structure that is built to last, and he built it the way he built everything, exactly and without excess, and when it was done he opened the door and showed it to her, without ceremony, and she walked in and looked at the stone floor and the shelved walls and the good door, and she said it was perfect. He said he was glad. She went back to the kitchen and started supper, and he went back to his work, and the larder door stood open in the afternoon light, which was the particular light of early May, warm and thin and full of the smell of new grass and cold water and the smoke from the neighbor's chimney 2 ridges over. The recipe tin sat on the kitchen shelf. The wire hook bent just so, holding the latch closed. She had not needed to replace the hook all winter. It held. On an evening in late May, with the kitchen windows open to the warm air, and Clara in bed, and Thomas doing his lessons at the table, and Calhoun on the porch with his coffee, Nora stood at the stove and stirred a pot and began to sing, the same low wandering song, her mother's song, the one without a name. Through the open window she could hear the creek and the pines and the last birds settling in for the night, and from the porch she heard nothing, which meant Calhoun was sitting still the way he sat still when he was listening to something, and she knew he was listening, and she let the song go where it wanted to go, which was out through the window and into the evening, and up toward the ridge where the last light was leaving the trees. Thomas did not look up from his slate, but after a moment he began to hum, quietly, following the melody, not quite in tune but close, in the way of someone who is learning a song by ear and has not yet decided to admit it. Nora kept stirring. The cabin held its warmth, not waiting for anyone, not anymore. And that was the story of Nora Voss, a woman who arrived in Harlan Creek with a leather satchel and a tin of recipe cards, and a voice that someone had decided was too rough, and who left nothing behind but a kitchen garden and a larder built to last, and a song that a boy learned by ear on a warm May evening without ever being asked. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this one. Thank you.